Hey guys, tonight we slip into the realm of myth and legend, where gods have all the magnificence of tabloid celebrities and all the charm of ancient tales. Picture this, a tapestry of starry night skies and echoing chariots, where our protagonist, a certain divine being known for his musical flair and penchant for drama, makes a spectacular entry. That's right, we're talking about none other than Apollo and his unexpected misadventure with cows that will have even the gods chuckling over their ambrosia. But brace yourselves, you probably won't survive this tale without a good chuckle or two. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey begins under the glow of a sun-drenched realm, where Apollo makes his dramatic entrance into the world of gods and mortals, a celestial debut that even an ancient red carpet event might envy. Born from the union of Zeus and Leto, Apollo's arrival was no ordinary birth. Leto, fleeing from the jealous wrath of Hera, finally found safe harbor on the floating island of Delos. There, amidst enchanted flora and fauna, young Apollo emerged, already glowing with a divine aura that promised feats of grandeur. Legend has it that as soon as he was born, Apollo was adorned with golden swaddling clothes and immediately exuded a brightness akin to his future role as the god of the sun. An infant deity filled with potential, radiating a scorching light that hinted at phenomenal powers waiting to be unfurled. The gods themselves trembled a little, not out of fear, but from anticipation of the splendor and influence Apollo would wield. Would he be a fearsome warrior, challenging Hades with as much ease as he would brush aside a lyre string, or a divine artist lyricizing the cosmos? Historians still argue whether Apollo's early days set the tone for gods and mortals alike, ushering a divine expectation upon his shoulders. Apollo, after all, is not cut from the mortal cloth. He is tasked to embody radiance, metaphorically and literally, as luminous as Helios himself. Yet, herein lay the quandary. His talents would soon shine elsewhere. Now, if Olympian family trees were diagrammed out like messy holiday dinner squabbles, Apollo's branch would glisten amidst a tree of larger-than-life relatives whose ambitions and egos could eclipse any solar deity. Zealous and youthful, Apollo's divinity held promise like an unopened gift, filled with celestial threads waiting to weave earth-shattering deeds. The floating island of Delos, an interesting historical tidbit, was believed by the ancients to be tethered to the sea by Apollo's birth, marking it as a sacred site transformed into a center of commerce and culture in the Aegean Sea. This notion paired the historical significance of the location with Apollo's mythical beginning, a blend of myth shaping reality. Cue the modern parallel. Perhaps Apollo's journey mirrors every freshly launched career, stepping into a world of both boundless opportunity and daunting expectations. Who wouldn't, after all, at some point yearn for an impactful persona coated with golden hues, alas without walking around in actual gold body paint like an ancient Oscar statuette? The quirks of the Greek pantheon are as varied as its myths, with Apollo's early days being a peculiar morsel best served not in grand conquests, but in exploring the budding possibilities within the universe of Olympus. How does one perceive an infant in the realm of the immortals, yet teeming with untapped potential? Cue an elaborate talent reveal coated with wit, stubbornness, and charm. In this realm where the feared and revered freely roam, Apollo's first breath was more than mere life. It was an assertion of power and destiny. Even in infancy, through whispers among olive groves and echoes within mountaintops, the world felt the tickle of anticipation that one day he'd wield something grand, or at the very least, play a dulcet tune on Olympus's grand stage. Divine powers echo in Apollo's first cry, promising deeds that even lesser gods and goddesses could only dream of achieving. It's as if you, the listener, have found yourself in the middle of an elaborate symphony, where the crescendo hints at a resolution both unexpected and dazzling. The promise of what Apollo can accomplish strikes a chord you'd expect in stories where immortal beings flex their prowess and settle family rivalries, often as melodramatically as they begin. But here is the twist that spices up those divine chronicles. Beneath that shimmering aura and glittering coronet, Apollo isn't just the embodiment of luminous grandeur, but an enigmatic figure whose unfolding path is studded with lessons more mortal than divine. These potent promises and sensational talents are yet just echoes of what's to come, poised like an arrow waiting in his quiver. With grandeur hanging thick in the air, you're left to ponder where this journey will go. Will Apollo fulfill every prophecy laid at his divine feet, or stumble awkwardly into mishaps more reminiscent of a comedy sketch? Perhaps there's some cosmic humor in watching greatness stumble into the world of bovine capers. Hilarity that not even the muses could have envisioned. And so, we glimpse the beginning. A birth so magnificent that it inspires awe as much as cheeky jests among the pantheon. Whether historians see it as profound or a spectacle, Apollo's entrance blesses us with a story deeply human beneath the divine facade. As we travel through time on this mythic journey, Apollo's celestial path glimmers with the luminescence of countless stars, just waiting to be charted by ears eager to follow the symphony of his legend. When it comes to the multi-talented members of the Olympian family, Apollo tends to sit at the top of the class. Picture the kid who's both the star quarterback and the lead violinist in the school's orchestra. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. From the moment Apollo entered the world, expectations were sky-high, and with good reason. Born to Zeus, king of the gods, with his signature thunderbolt accessory, and Leto, a titaness whose patience would put you through a competition of kindness with a saint, Apollo was destined for greatness from day one. He came into this world during a time marked by chaos and divine drama, quite literally under the gold-tinged rays of Delos, one of those ancient Greek islands now more famous as Instagram-worthy vacation spots than for their deific origins. Historians, always eager for a lively debate, still argue whether this particular birth story had a more significant point than just adding flair to the family's escapades. Did it signify the golden center of divine creativity, or just a precursor to the headaches Apollo would later face? The jury is still out, but let's continue. Now, you might rightly wonder, what's so special about Apollo, apart from that chiseled jawline and those flowing locks? Well, my dear curious listener, it all starts with the music. Apollo wasn't just any musician, he was the musician. Imagine if Beethoven, Jimi Hendrix, and your favorite Spotify algorithm had a trio. Apollo would be the leader of that ensemble. His lyre, an instrument he probably held more dearly than his family. You know how siblings can be. Wasn't just an object of artistic expression, but a tool of persuasion and charm. Whenever Apollo strummed its strings, the world stopped and listened, caught in the harmonious spell. Even the mighty Zeus himself was known to pause in his thunder hurling, and that's saying something. In fact, the first time he played, an impromptu concert on Mount Olympus, there wasn't a dry eye or an active volcano to be found, if you catch my drift. The music had such soul-stirring power that it brought together the chained Poseidon and the ever-elusive Hades for a rare family gathering. As you can imagine, they were a fractured sort. It said that the trees swayed more gracefully, and the ocean's waves danced in sync with his melodies, rather like the magical realism vibes you might get in a Gabriel Garcia Marquez book. Apollo's music didn't just charm the ears, it sowed seeds of hope, girded the courage of heroes, and, as exaggerated tales go, even persuaded the sun and moon to maintain their steady celestial dance. So vigorous was his musical sway that historians have puzzled over whether his real claim to fame was his artistic prowess or simply the fact that he managed to keep this cosmic choreography from spiraling into chaos. There's even a scholarly debate that's like the historian's equivalent of Marvel versus DC. Do we credit Apollo with more influence over the mortal realm or the divine? The records are sketchy, given that most ancient texts tend to romanticize a tad bit. Think of it as hyperbolic, classical TikTok. So why all the fuss? With musical talents that could pacify tempests in hearts, you'd think Apollo would want to spend his days in everlasting jam sessions. Instead, he was fated to lead us through various sagas, where his lyrical virtuosity was only one facet of his many gifts. As we sit back in this cozy narrative, remember that even the deity of music didn't escape the less glamorous duties of divine responsibilities. I mean, singing to cows generally wasn't on his to-do list, except in one particular adventure that we'll visit soon. Before we get lost in this Olympian soap opera, consider this. The ancient world had its own ideas concerning musical talents. The Greeks credited Apollo and his harmonious prowess with bridging divine and human realms. A mainstream historical fact for you. It wasn't uncommon for musicians, poets, and artists to invoke his spirit before performances, hoping to capture a sliver of his genius. But there's also a fringier tidbit, the kind that might invite a raised brow. Some claimed his lyre was actually crafted from the sinews of past giants, leading to the peculiar belief that its music retained whispers of old, forgotten myths. Some even say this was why his tunes bore such haunting beauty, though I wouldn't put much stock in giant sinew guitar strings, probably requires more maintenance than your average six-string, anyway. For now, let's bask in these musical epiphanies a little longer, setting the stage for the tasks and trials ahead. As Apollo strummed his way through divine circles, crafting symphonies that seemed to weave directly into the delicate fabric of the world, expectations soared, forming a cloud of optimistic prophecies and anticipations of greatness. With each chord, they painted pictures of heroism and triumph. Perhaps you might imagine a Greek lyrist strumming tunes about grandeur, with a stylish toga and a flair for melodrama, if only Apollo's ultimate nemesis might be the pastoral challenge of herding cows. But as foreboding metaphors go, sometimes the force of music must face the tune-playing whims and wiles of fate itself, literally, in his story. As we prepare to mosey on through this saga of sounds and odysseys, bear in mind Apollo's kind of musical prodigy enveloped greater cosmic designs that we are yet to unfold. Ain't it a grand expectation, though? Here's hoping the lyre stays within reach when Apollo's journey turns southward, where the grass may not necessarily be greener, but the experiences definitely make for a good old bedtime story. Picture yourself moving through the whispering breeze of Thessaly, where the air smells faintly of wild thyme and the gentle chime of cowbells punctuates the serene landscape. It's the sort of pastoral dreamscape where you'd half expect a poet to recline, penning odes to the sheer tranquility. Here, amongst the rolling hills and verdant pastures, you'll discover the famed cows of King Admetus, a herd with a history as rich as any epic poem. These are no ordinary cows, mind you. Legend has it that King Admetus's cows were touched by magic, their sleek coats gleaming under the sun like woven silk. In an era where manual labor was as common as olive oil, caring for such a herd might seem like a weighty task. But Admetus, a king favored by Apollo himself, enjoyed the reputation that came with owning such a remarkable group of bovines. You might wonder why cows, of all things, held such significance. Well, back in ancient Greece, cows weren't just walking hamburger supplies, they were symbols of wealth and prosperity, living chalices of milk that nourished families. Livestock like Admetus's herd were celebrity bovines, complete with divine drama and a sprinkle of godly mischief. Dining on simple fodder, their lives were blissful and undemanding, unlike everyone else's around them. These cows were blessed with a longevity that sparked the curiosity even of scholars, who say, between debates on temple acoustics and toga styles, whether divine intervention actually affects cow physiology. Ahem. Now, why exactly would Olympian gods concern themselves with cows? It turns out, a miraculous herd like this came with its own challenges. The high esteem in which these cows were held meant they were sought after by many, desired for their uniqueness and status. Managing them was not unlike handling a celebrity feud on social media prone to unexpected twists and flame wars. Remember, this was an age where gods sauntered about, looking for tales to spin, rivalries to nurture, and perhaps the odd game of pastoral capture the flag with errant herds. If only King Admetus had invested in the ancient Greek equivalent of CCTV, he might have stayed one step ahead in thwarting potential divine cow nappers. However, what made these cows truly miraculous was perhaps not the divine sparkle in their eyes or their enchantment, but more the chaotic potential they unwittingly aroused amongst the gods. You see, with such a valuable herd, the challenges also swirled with opportunity and temptation. The challenge was as much about keeping the cows as it was about maintaining peace in a realm where gods took umbrage at imagined slights and Olympian parents never quite let their children forget those toddler tantrums. Historians still argue whether these cows were inherently magical, or if their fame was but the outcome of godly shenanigans and a scarcity of quality entertainment. Picture cowboys of the divine realm, but with togas instead of 10-gallon hats and an entourage of relentless harp music. And then, there was Apollo. Prophetic, handsome, musically gifted Apollo. He was just the type to strut into such a scene with a flourish, composing ballads dedicated to mooing muses and grand intentions. After all, what divine entity wouldn't want to stand front and center of a pastoral opera, saving priceless animals from an impending drama, or at least, trying to? With Apollo, the stakes get higher and rather interesting. His aspirational attempts at herding, spoiler alert, aren't quite the stuff of legend. Before we tango forcefully through that divine bungle, let's not forget Apollo's culturally rich music, the stuff even stones at Delphi love to groove to. Ironically, these cows, uninterested in anything but chewing cud, remain unimpressed by his musical prestige. Thus entering the picture, King Admetus's cows are more than just a pastoral aspiration. They're a summons to Apollo to stretch the limits of his comfort zone, which until now mostly held harps and laurel crowns. If cows could snicker under their breaths, Admetus's herd might have snickered at the notion of a radiant, lyre-slinging god stepping in as their shepherd. The idea of Apollo muddying his celestial sandals amongst mere earthly concerns offers a comedy of contrasts. Pity there wasn't a Greek god of reality TV back then. It's these cows, then, with their own strange allure, that lay the foundations for rivalries to unfold, skills to be tested, and lessons reached from the ludicrous to the infinitely sage. The herd of Admetus represent everything Apollo is about to face, a friendlier sort of nemesis, paved by cow pats rather than sinister plots. The antennal sound of cowbells may as well be the musical note on which hangs Apollo's next life lesson, a melody of moos rather than stringed serenades. So, as the cows amble about their sunlit pasture, obliviously pulling deities into a plot thicker than ancient Greek epics, remember, in this realm, even the mundane becomes a puzzling piece in the jigsaw of divine affairs. Now, Hermes, the nimble-footed god, brother to Apollo, but very much his own brand of chaos, comes into our tale with that unmistakable glint in his eye. You know, the one that suggests mischief is more of a calling than a pastime. Picture Hermes as a slightly younger sibling in an ancient sitcom, a character sketch that hasn't significantly evolved even through myth's grand retelling. His ambition is taller than Mount Olympus itself, spurred on by that irrepressible urge to stir the pot of cosmic order. If ever there was a deity whose demeanor could rival even Apollo, with all his solar flair, it was Hermes. His enterprising spirit slipped beneath the golden net of sibling rivalry, aiming to snatch just a little more divine spotlight for himself. As you stretch yourself out on your imaginary recliner, the kind that glides upon clouds, let's unwind this ball of myths yarn. Picture, if you will, that Hermes' nimble fingers doing the figurative knitting or perhaps tangling, as he crafts a plan with the deftness of one born to juggle a dozen schemes at once. This plan, dear listener, involves the intriguing challenge of King Admetus's remarkable cows. Now, you may wonder, what makes these bovine beauties so alluring? Why? History records their ability to charm even the most steely-hearted cowherd. They were nothing short of miraculous. A touch of bovine brilliance grazed into existence by the divine hands of the gods themselves. These cows, grazing with an elegance that was probably unmatched in the annals of mythical farm management, had been handed over to Admetus through Zeus's benevolent mischief, itself a rare delicacy to savor. Perhaps Hermes saw in them a muse for crafting his latest trick, a tiny rebellion against the expected norms of godly conduct. Remind yourself, if you can stop yawning on your cloud for a moment, that Hermes is no stranger to innovation. He's credited with inventing the lyre from a tortoise shell. After all, sometimes it pays to know your music history. It might stop the next Hermes from rummaging through your garden. With his plan beginning to crystallize, Hermes moved with the quiet precision of a feline on a mission, nimble, sure-footed, and imbued with that spark of divine charisma that all tricksters wear as a crown. Alongside Apollo's bright splendor, Hermes' wit provided the moonlit counterpart, leading one to ponder just how the paths of siblings can diverge wildly, each taking on shades of felicity and farce. Historians still argue whether these tales illuminate the greater truths of human nature or simply reflect our eternal fascination with the contrast between sunlight and shadow. Hermes then set into motion what could only be described as a masterstroke of stealth. Picture it, the dark eyes of the night watching with bated breath as Hermes, his sandals blessed by the airiest touch of divine construction, slid silently in and out of sight, tactically positioning himself for Admetus's naive gaze to direct it away from his grand herd. As a fringe note in mythography recounts, Hermes might have persuaded those nocturnal creatures of the forest, owls, perhaps, or creatures even more obscure, to act as lookouts, their quiet chirps and whispers becoming a symphony of sly assistance. The cows, standing resplendent under the moon's gentle glow, had no idea they were about to be part of a divine inventory transfer conducted without the slightest clue of a raised eyebrow. A bit like a corporate takeover conducted in the silence of dreams. Yes, this was one for Olympus's annals of cunning exploits. And surely, if one thing's true in both myth and Elysian reality, it's that humor often rides the coattails of even the most dignified schemes. Now, let's downshift our pace, letting the weight of this trickster's plan settle into your thoughts like a snugly fitted pillow. Hermes' ambition was formidable, a testament to kin beyond blood, the driving force of ambition meeting innovation, wrapped in the Greeks' perpetual theater of gods. His is a tale spun with the majesty of cotton candy under a sky of sepia stars, creative, sweet, and designed to dissolve right into legend. As you lay there, cradled by myth's nocturnal embrace, allow your imagination to roam just a bit further. Picture the cows, guided by Hermes' subtle influence, meandering gently into the inky embrace of night. It's a scene not unlike the age-old farmers, those souls of pastoral lore who endured crooks and charms alike to guard their herds. But Hermes was no farmer, and this was no ordinary herding. It was a parade in serenity led by the divine offspring of trickery himself, casting shadows into the night that even the moon might raise an eyebrow at if it weren't so enraptured by the unfolding saga. And so you breathe a gentle sigh, that perfect segue into sleep, as you ponder Hermes' boldness, a character study in divine sibling rivalry played out in the rural theater of ancient Greece. Whether it's a lesson in rivalry or the power of creative chaos, these stories hold a mirror to our own quirks and dreams. As you drift, ready for Apollo's daylight serenade to finally pull him into this multifaceted parable, allow Hermes' night of mischief to remind you of all the clever whispers that come alive under the velvet cover of night. As the night sky wraps itself around the tranquil beauty of the Greek countryside, a slow current of anticipation becomes almost tangible in the cool air. You can almost hear the delicate rustle of olive leaves whispering secrets, their age-old wisdom tucked neatly into the darkness. Everything about this night signals a kind of quiet chaos, a disruption under the watchful eye of a moon that is far too bright for ordinary happenings. Enter Hermes, the glib-tongued deity whose footsteps are as silent as the shadows he moves through. You can sense his excitement, an electric spark beneath his usually composed exterior. Tonight, he isn't just another Olympian lounging around in divine luxury, sipping nectar like it's happy hour at a Mount Olympus version of Margaritaville. No, tonight Hermes plans to flip the script. Hermes possesses the kind of cunning that endears him to some but earns wary glances from others, the ones who still remember that time he decided everyone needed a pair of wings on their shoes. However, you must hand it to him. Unlike most, who might curl up with a philosophy scroll, Hermes is out here orchestrating nocturnal exploits. He's the color commentator in life's unfurling drama, throwing challenges into the mix just to see who rises or stumbles. And stumble is the word. Over yonder, a herd of cows settles under the watch not of their usual attendants, but a solitary, mischievous figure whose eyes twinkle with brewing plots. It's said these aren't your everyday cows, though really, has anyone ever looked a bovine in the eye and gleaned the mystical potential simmering beneath? Historians still argue whether the cattle themselves had a stake in this tale or were simply pawns, some suggesting a divine lineage of the hoofed creatures. These are the prized cows of King Admetus, famed throughout Thessaly. Legend holds that they graze serenely, their milk producing a cheese so enchanting it might inspire poets and compromise diets on Olympus. It's akin to the ancient world's culinary enigma. How can something so mundane wield secret powers? Perhaps what truly baffles scholars is not just the cow's miraculous upkeep, but their enviable status as the originators of really, really good cheese. Cheddar's precursors, if you will. But I digress. As the humans nestle into sleep, Hermes capitalizes on the oblivion that accompany restful dreams, setting his eyes on this very herd. It's a heist worthy of applause, or at least a chuckle, because nothing says, "I've got this," quite like single-handedly leading a bunch of cows into the night. The gleam in his eyes might be from the moonlight or could be the glitter of a rigorous plan unfolding. Hermes, after all, knows that his brother Apollo, brilliant, revered, and conspicuously less practiced in the art of hurting, will be left feeling distinctly off-key once the sun rises. Picture Hermes, had drawn over his head like some divine commander's cap, weaving between these bovine beauties with unheard promises. It's a scene worthy of a bronze sculpture, if only for the subtle irony. For who might expect the very messenger of the gods to delegate himself to the lowly employment of cow-stealing? Yet, here he is, neither overzealous nor rushed, just smooth and deliberate in his choreography of mischief. Some softly reasoned words, a nudge here and a coax there, and thus the cows begin their silent drift from the pasture. Hermes' trickery, slick as an olive oil spread on fresh pita, ushers every last one of those mystical creatures away with an obedience usually reserved for far less whimsical undertakings. One must wonder, as hermetical logic unfolds in this dreamy, moonlit night, about the ancient story's complex array of family drama. For the gods were not uniformly aligned in camaraderie or well-placed familial love, no cosmic episode of keeping up with the Olympians. Instead, they thrived on rivalries that shaped the fabric of human stories about them. Hermes and Apollo embody this dynamic sibling rivalry, an age-old tradition where, instead of comparing grades, you swindle livestock. Again, historians might squabble over the finer details, including whether being the god of messengers counts as a nerdy occupation. As dawn hints at its arrival on the horizon, signaling another chorus of wakefulness, you can almost grasp the weight of forgotten truths lingering in the changing air. Hermes, now a shadow among silhouettes, vanishes into the retreating night, glancing back only to smile at his work, a deed that will soon tip the balance, at least temporarily, in his favor. It is an equilibrium as precarious as the daily exchange rate between gold drachma and Croesus's bank account, seemingly transformative yet eternally unquantifiable. And where does this leave Apollo, you ask? Asleep, his mind woven into dreams of flawless harp strings and golden laurels, utterly unaware of the impending test the new light will bring. His brilliance, unrivaled in Olympian splendor, is soon to be questioned by earthly challenges, offering valuable lessons in hubris, and perhaps a bit more humility than his comfort zone usually allows. Imagine the world waking up, dew clinging to every blade and leaf still reluctant in giving up the night's secrets. Apollo, once a champion of the arts, will face a day robust with unexpected, humbling quests, a day initiated by Hermes' playful transgression, igniting a tale that will mix melody and madness, all against a pastoral backdrop filled with the gentle mooing of its unwitting tonality. Thus, the stage is set for Apollo's forthcoming struggle, a divine revelation wrapped snugly in the garb of mundane reality. And so, as you tuck yourself further into the soothing embrace of your own dreams, remember the quiet cadence of unrest prevailing on a timeless night where divine antics serve as the orchestra to life's curious serenades. You find yourself in a bit of a divine conundrum with Apollo, whose presence usually fills the room, or, the great expanse of Olympus, with radiant charm and unstoppable confidence. But this time, instead of basking in the glow of his own excellence, Apollo is pacing furiously under the classical equivalent of a rain cloud. Any trace of his usual poise has been replaced by the prickling annoyance that only a god of such stature can experience when faced with something as mundane yet unfathomably irksome as a herd of cows on the loose. These aren't just any cows. Remember, they belong to King Admetus, whose miraculous cows almost defy belief with their ability to produce endless streams of milk, a boon and a burden depending on one's proximity to lactose intolerance. So, when Apollo took up the task of looking after them, as one does after finding themselves momentarily displaced from the limelight due to a mischievous brother, he thought, how hard could this be? It's like thinking you can babysit a hyperactive squirrel on a caffeine rush. It always seems much less chaotic in theory. But here he is, standing ankle-deep in mud, a scenario not even his most pessimistic expressions could have prepared him for. His divine glory, usually undimmable, is now threatened by something as pedestrian as cow manure. You can almost hear the dramatic sigh of a deity being humbled. What Apollo didn't count on was Hermes' propensity for pranks, or as might be more accurately described, divine disruptions. Historians still argue whether Hermes' cunning antics were a precursor to modern-day practical jokes or simply expressions of Olympian politics. It's possible either interpretation is correct, considering Hermes' eclectic list of accomplishments. This was no mere prank, however. To Hermes, this little episode was crafting a symphony in the form of highly orchestrated chaos, demonstrating that diplomacy could come later. Apollo finds himself standing in a field, scanning the landscape. It's all Greek to him, pun fully intended. The grass seems to stretch on endlessly, much like your reading of War and Peace that one summer, absorbing his dismay into its lushness. His attempts to harness any sort of shepherding skills resemble more a fish out of water than a future god of prophecy. Apollo, whose fingertips can summon the most melodious sounds imaginable, struggles against the hushed symphony of crickets and distant cowbells mocking him in rhythm. Cows, as anyone who has been to a petting zoo will know, are not particularly ambitious. They follow their own understanding of schedules, lives filled with chewing cud and not much else. And so, they've dispersed like teenage concert-goers believing they've sighted a member of a boy band, each heading a different direction. Apollo attempts to rally them, not with song, as one might have expected, but with increasingly frustrated gestures that are as effective as trying to stop a flood with a teacup. You can't help but imagine what the other gods might be thinking if they were watching. Sure, there's no live streaming in ancient Greece, but news travels fast when you have Hermes delivering your messages, double-talking his way into everyone's good books and making viral sensations out of small-town gossip. Despite Apollo's divine nature, the cows simply stare blankly at him, their eyes reflecting a world where apple branches are superior to celestial authority. In an attempt to apply his usual modus operandi, Apollo recalls tales of great tacticians like Hannibal, who led elephants across the Alps, though, notably, not cows across the plains. It's said Hannibal took advantage of local wines to help his elephants find courage amidst icy passes, but perhaps Apollo would find less luck if he attempted to charm these cows with music, as they seem more indifferent than enchanted. Consider this the universe's way of teaching even a god the importance of versatility. Because when you're Apollo, cosmic ally and foe in equal potential, your usual toolkit doesn't typically include rustic farm know-how. It's like a Broadway star suddenly asked to perform at a local karaoke night, where the only track available is an obscure folk classic. Fancy footwork alone just won't cut it. It's moments like these that showcase the very human-like qualities of these Olympian gods, full of imperfections and unexpected vulnerabilities. Divine or not, Apollo is having one of those days where you're just not quite hitting your stride. Historians fondly debate whether this saga of misplaced confidence and leisurely bovine had any impact on Apollo's later dealings with mortals. There's something client-relatable in the way a cosmically significant being navigates such terrestrial absurdity. And so, Apollo's unlikely challenge becomes more of a quest for humility, one that's oddly reminiscent of misadventures we might recognize in our own lives when life delivers a puzzle-solving headache. If a golden dripping pillar of power and harmony can trudge through, finding old habits useless amidst unexpected derailments, maybe there's hope for us yet in the mundane challenges we face daily. In the process, one might argue that Apollo inadvertently stumbles into an awkward kind of enlightenment, the sort that transforms frustration into a broader understanding of both his own limits and the perseverance required to overcome them. The cows, ignorant and wholly unimpressed, mark another underwhelming chapter in their own bovine-centric perspectives. Somewhere, likely humming and waiting for his grand reveal, Hermes bides his time, relishing in a plot well executed, knowing full well that the balance of familial pranks and roguish antics continues to serve as a key driver in the intricate politics of the divine. Meanwhile, Apollo's challenge has only just begun, a winding road toward humility and growth that promises a narrative rich with both humor and wisdom, painting even the loftiest gods as elements of their own charmingly flawed humanity. You find yourself standing amongst the rolling hills dotted with cows, desperately grasping at the reins of a task that couldn't be more foreign to you. Yes, You are Apollo, the god of music and prophecy, forced to swap your soothing lyre for a clumsy shepherd's crook. Your musical fingers, adept at weaving melodies that dance in the air, now fumble through strings of hay, attempting to cajole a stubborn herd that appears more interested in chewing cud than cooperating with your divine directives. Let's imagine, for a moment, what that must feel like. Each cow seems to have a mind of its own, a mind evidently unimpressed by your Olympian status. A breeze, gentle and mocking, tousles your perfect golden hair, serving only to underline the comedy of your predicament. Remember that time you thought being a god meant eternal ease and popularity? Yeah, about that. Transporting yourself into this pastoral scene, you can't help but notice the mundanity of it all, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the musical epiphanies you had showered upon mortals and gods alike. Here, the only applause comes from the occasional clap of thunder, perhaps Hermes himself snickering from above, as he observes your trials with amused detachment. Step by step, you fumble through the basic motions known to mere mortals who call themselves herders. You try to corral the cows with what you assume is an authoritative stance, or thereabout. Yet the animals, sensing your discomfort, scatter with an obstinacy that echoes down to the ages. Historically, herding has been associated with patience and subtlety, both qualities that have yet to feature prominently in your divine resume. However, this exercise in humility offers some insights into the daily grind of human existence. Historians still argue whether Apollo ever truly mastered the art of cow tickling, a fringe method believed to encourage docile behavior, but let's just say the cows looked singularly unimpressed with his attempts. Each misstep is a reminder of the unexpected challenges lying far beyond your harmonious comfort zone. You're no longer orchestrating flawless concerts that leave audiences spellbound. Oh no, you're cajoling beasts who seem to selectively hear your directives, perhaps understanding only the language of sweet grass and fragrant meadows. You might ponder ancient herding techniques. Were they as painful as this? The mind shifts to how the ancient Egyptians, for example, managed their livestock, some suggesting using whistles made of reeds, an irony not lost on a music deity. In this land of patience testing beyond the realm of music, you steady yourself, recalling historically quirky aspects of rural life, like how medieval cowhoods in Europe were sometimes thought to use singing and gentle chants to steer their cattle. Alas, your attempts at singing to the cows yield little more than curious sideways glances, their indifference no less disheartening than being booed off Olympus for an off-key performance. And here's your third bit of deep scholarly intrigue to mull over. Historians still argue whether Apollo might have secretly entertained fond thoughts of escaping this cow chaos by employing mortal trickery, learning a thing or two from Hermes' legendary antics. But no, perseverance prevails, and so you trudge forward, your cloak tangling around your ankles, a forlorn figure against a sunset that cares nothing for your divine melody and less for your frustrations. The cows meander under the sprawling sky, their slow lumbering hypnotizing if only you could see beyond your current desperation for control. Your momentary lapse into toil-born meditation provides a poignant visual, a celestial being stuck stubbornly in an ordinary, oh-so-mortal task. Perhaps this surreal experiment serves as a watershed moment for you. A god who had long orchestrated the cosmos, now caught in the humbling task of orchestrating cattle. As cows come into line, albeit reluctantly, a faint glimmer of hope insists that you may, just possibly, be inching closer to understanding the rhythm of this laborious life. Ancient pastoralists might muse at your clumsy sway, reminding you that mastery is born of time and practice, not raw divine talent. Crocodile Dunk sunscreen might still fare better than this fumbling affair. Yet there's an earnestness in your stride now, tinged with an endearing measure of humility. Ultimately, your clash against this bucolic backdrop leaves an inkling that herding, while seemingly simplistic, demands its master's respect, a symphony all its own, even if far removed from your usual semicircles of Apollo's bozers. The evening shadows creep longer, and as you haul fragments of divine willpower together, the cows, for a brief inspired moment, align with your intention, as if offering a bovine nod to your reluctant perseverance. And maybe, just maybe, this will be the tale they tell on Olympus of when the renowned Apollo, who swayed with notes of high heaven, stumbled clumsily through earth tones, yet learned to savor the sour notes that make the sweet ones all the more exquisite. As you revel in this chaotic pastoral ballet, you can't help but feel a reluctant tug of affection for this muddled, and ever so slightly maddening, realm of crooks, cows, and gentle chaos. And so, there you are, Apollo, having descended from the pedestal of godly music and divine splendor, to the rather unglamorous, rudimentary occupation of herding cows. Imagine an ancient deity who can strum a lute to perfection and serenade the heavens, now holding a shepherd's crook and attempting to muster authority over a chorus of mooing cattle. It's a bit like asking Beethoven to perform a barn dance, a spectacle as endearingly flawed as you might imagine. The sun casts long shadows as you inevitably realize that herding is not an activity suited for someone accustomed to applause rather than swarms of stubborn hoofs. Your celestial robes, impractical for this earthy endeavor, are now dotted with traces of nature's embrace, a smudge of mud here, a fastidious insect there, as if the countryside is playfully welcoming you to its club. What's fashion without a bit of pastoral charm, right? Patience becomes your new instrument. Absent are the linear and predictable melodies of hymns and orchestrations. Instead, you find yourself entangled in a dissonant symphony of bovine chaos. Each cow seemingly has its own agenda, and they certainly don't subscribe to the linear logic you so dearly cherish. Observe this assortment of divine comedy as one particularly obstinate cow decides to head in the opposite direction, challenging your newfound patience. Even the famed patience of Penelope might waver here. Herding, a task that seems so simple, actually unfolds into an intricate dance. The subtlety required is akin to a slow, enduring echo of a bard's tale, an art form passed down through generations of mortals who, unlike you, didn't have divine powers to circumvent challenges. Remember that infamous Egyptian crocodile dung sunscreen? Let's just be thankful that doesn't factor into today's task of herding. This unassuming activity of guiding creatures across a field, it turns out, demands more preparation and dexterity than you'd anticipated. Historians still argue whether the term cattle whisperer originated from such divine attempts at cow coaxing, or merely from mortal ingenuity. Either way, your whispered reassurances to the cows seem to fall on deaf, or rather, selectively deaf, ears. Interestingly, cattle, contrary to assigned stereotypes, have remarkable memories and are known to form complex social structures, a tidbit for you as you waggle the crook. They've been cooperating with humans since around 8000 BCE, despite the occasional divine hiccup like today. Perhaps their hardened resilience in the face of divine disorganization forms part of their charm, a testament to evolution's sly humor. To further complicate matters, Hermes' nightly exploits ensure that the cattle are already nervous and suspicious. They peer at you with an unsettling blend of curiosity and premonition, possibly debating among themselves the nature of this new shepherd. It doesn't help that the cows seem to have memorized all possible escape routes, chancing upon even more ways to challenge your celestial grit. The wind carries faint echoes of Hermes' laughter, a spectral reminder of your brother's omnipresent mischief. With each faltering step you take, he finds pleasure in seeing the mighty Apollo subdued by what cattlemen have mastered over ages of honed practice. It's a humbling realization that we're all simply players on this mortal stage, orchestrated by scripts written beyond our control. Still, perseverance lies in the heart of godly feats, or so they often preach. So you soldier on, reflecting perhaps that even Zeus, your grandest kin, might smirk upon seeing his radiant child tangled like an eager intern on their first field job. Even divine beings know the sound of mocking laughter, albeit one that heralds understanding more than ridicule. The sun, one of your loyal companions, begins its descent, ushering in a cool, reassuring twilight. This serves as a natural guide, calm yet assertive, nudging cattle toward what they instinctively view as shelter. It's a poignant reminder of celestial mechanics, the immutable laws at play, guiding even the chaotic wanderings of cattle. As you ponder this bomb of routine, the horizon stretches far and wide, promising the end to an otherwise whimsical day. You start to gather the tired, cream-colored wave of cows, hearts still racing but slowly attuning to your newfound rhythm. Somewhere in this humdrum of domesticated life lies a seed of zen, a quiet acknowledgement that fulfillment is as much in the niche corners of humdrum existence as in the overt acts of feigned triumph. The journey transforms into a subdued sonata, pebbled with mischief and quixotic gestures, one that whispers to you about the divine nature hidden in routine. With each step, each mood-lit encounter with a bovine perceived as an impediment, there's a dawning realization. Even Apollo, the formidable harbinger of divine arts, can find solace in humility, a tranquil moment suspended between dusk and day, where the true art of herding evolves. In this quiet, serene acceptance, there's an epiphany. Your prestige, once fueled by grandiose accomplishments, has diversely evolved. Now it includes the hum of the ordinary, enriched by adversity's harmonizing chords, promising new symphonies as day succumbs to glorious night. As the cattle settle, the newly minted cowherd shepherds them into the enclosure, between dreams of future melodies and the echoes of this rustic odyssey held close, gently cradling lessons of humility amidst the divine heritage. Perhaps, when tomorrow beckons another hurting adventure or symphony, you'll find harmony in both tunes, the emboldened strum of your lyre and the gentle lull of patient shepherding, a testament to the art of living beyond divine pursuits. As you stand there, watching Apollo futilely chase after the irreplaceable herd of cows that Hermes had gleefully spirited away, it becomes unmistakably clear that a god's temperance is being tested. Hermes, the ever-charming trickster, has not tired of his playful antics. Picture this: Apollo, who usually radiates the poise and grace of a deity destined for greatness, is now darting across a field with the exasperation of someone who has just lost an auction for a highly coveted item. It's as if Hermes has taken Apollo's pride and joy, a masterfully composed symphony, and replaced every melodious note with the quaking sounds of mooing cows. The surreal dance continues, where Hermes seems to glide effortlessly, always one hoof ahead, teasing Apollo's ever-straining patience. You can almost hear Hermes chuckling to himself as he whispers, "Catch me if you can, brother," leaving Apollo pondering how he went from serenading the gods with his lyre to being reduced to an impromptu cowboy. You might wonder if Hermes, in the spirit of modern mischief, had considered opening a niche escape room on Mount Olympus, his first challenge being impossible cow retrieval. In the midst of this divine slapstick, one might recall that experts still debate how ancient Greeks viewed this playful sibling rivalry. Was it a simple tale of sibling bickering, or a broader commentary on the virtues of humility and the folly of hubris? Regardless, the tale keeps unfolding, much like the scrolls of papyri where these myths were first penned, perhaps with one scribe sneaking a chuckle now and then. The sly Hermes, who always knows just the right moment to pull on the reins of fate, continuously outsmarts Apollo, who is trying to keep his composure. The god of the sun is burning with a different kind of heat now, his legendary patience wearing thin as each cow slips through his grasp like water through a sieve. Let's be honest, watching Apollo fumble does bring a peculiar form of satisfaction, like witnessing your overachieving sibling flounder at a task you expertly mastered long ago. Historians still argue whether Hermes' motivation was purely to prove a point or if he was just having the time of his immortal life. As this sequence of antics continues, you might find yourself marveling at how humane the gods appear in their imperfections. Hermes, the eternal prankster, and Apollo, his patient yet faltering older brother, weave a rich tapestry of mischief and life lessons. One could imagine, perhaps after a delightful toga party, mortals recounting these stories, their laughter echoing under the moonlit sky as they jest. And then Apollo thought he could outsmart Hermes. It's almost as if this was the ancient Greek version of family game night gone spectacularly awry. Imagine, for a second, Hermes reflecting on his storied exploits to a curious crowd, assuredly including them the time he led Apollo on a wild chase. Yes, Apollo was quite the sight as he darted about, more lost than Theseus without his string, he might boast. But didn't Hermes himself once find himself ensnared by a simple cowbell, a signal he now uses to tiptoe closer to the boundary of his brother's patience? Much like many a clever plan, it thrives on timing, precision, and a little bit of chaos thrown in for fun. After all, we could speculate. Hermes might secretly revel in poking at the cracks of divinity, just to see which stones would crumble. As the scene plays out, your heart may give a little leap of schadenfreude as you see Apollo, donning a distinctly ungodlike scowl, reaching some new peak of frustration. And while he fumbles, one must visualize the Great Wall of China, standing witness since its inception around the same time our myths were being woven, indulging in its own ancient contemplation of human and divine folly alike. Might it muse that, whether gods or humans, one's greatest adversary is often cloaked in the guise of a playful brother? Yet, beyond the playful tussle and mischievous bends of fate, the heart of the tale beats steadily, a reminder that even the greatest of us can be brought low by simpler things. Indeed, you ponder, were the cows ever really the point? Or was the jest on Apollo a spotlight shined not on his ineffable talent, but on his immense will to triumph, even when the universe seems to conspire against him? As Hermes tosses another cheeky wink over his shoulder at his brother, you might envisage a world in which this divine game mirrors the very real and complex dynamics of familial bonds, expectations, and the unrelenting desire for recognition. This interaction between Hermes and Apollo is one of humanity's oldest and most colorful vignettes, like an illustrated manuscript retouched with hues of humor, brotherhood, and the relentless pursuit of proving oneself. In closing your eyes, you can almost hear the ancient laughter of those who perhaps saw their everyday interactions with family mirrored in the stars as Apollo, climbing his personal Olympus, rides the waves of futility and folly in equal amounts. And maybe, just maybe, you find comfort in knowing that even deities partake in the all-too-familiar dance of outstretched patience and sibling antics. Yet again, you find yourself in the middle of these ancient sagas, trailing a certain god with radiant hair and even more luminous determination. Remember, this is Apollo, he of the lyre, the laurel wreath, and that fabulous sense of divine entitlement. Just imagine him now, standing amidst fields, utterly out of his depth. His sandals, a questionable choice for agricultural labor, are now woefully muddy, and his once immaculate tunic bears ominous stains of grasses and dust. Indignant, perhaps, but deterred, never. There's a quintessential image of divine perseverance for you. Apollo, valiantly plodding along, relics of Olympus still clinging to his every motion while he tries valiantly not to stumble over a cow patty. His mission seems simple, reclaiming the cows that slipped away like shadows under Hermes's mischievous schemes. Yet, let's not forget, Homer didn't write epics about Apollo's barnyard escapades for a reason. It turns out that cattle are far less predictable than composing a perfect melody. Each day in this olfactory battlefield of bovine chaos brings new encounters. He's confronted by the sullen stare of a particularly obstinate heifer or the unexpected blow of a tail swatting at non-existent flies. Let's pause to acknowledge the irony and even a hint of comedy in this mythological scene. Apollo, who could cause the muses to weep with delight at his songs, now struggles to orchestrate the return of a herd. It's like watching a concert violinist attempting to win at a particularly stubborn game of Pictionary. And then there's the celestial drama of it all. Apollo doesn't have the luxury of switching to an offbeat indie soundtrack to offset his woes, a concession we're sure he would appreciate. Instead, he perseveres under the sun he himself is supposed to chariot through the sky. That in itself should give him a bit of perspective, don't you think? Historians still argue whether Apollo's frustration inspired him to channel solar flares into more fervent midday rays, heightening the mythical atmosphere. After all, how fitting that even daylight plays a conspiratorial role against him, gleaming everywhere but on his prospects of success. Now, you might wonder what's fueling this tenacity when all odds and odorous obstacles seem to imply retreat. This is where that uniquely human, or godly, in this case, stubborn streak surfaces, the insistent nod to fate, to destiny. Apollo must feel somewhere deep in his celestial heart that this trial is more than a battle of wills with livestock. Perhaps a smidge of pride lingers in his divine composure, the compelling need to salvage dignity or the tantalizing whisper of another mythological moral waiting to be born. It's within these scenes of vintage Apollo, a determinately pursuing immortality's more mundane challenges, that whispered stories of what it means to be both him and not quite human are woven. He's a god on a journey intersecting with every litter-speckled struggle humans face, albeit a lavishly ornamental one at that. Like when you've committed to finishing a notoriously difficult pumpkin puzzle only to realize you've started on the wrong piece. There's an artistic charm to persistence. And part of the art in persistence, as Ferdinand Foch eloquently put it and surely never expected a god to experience, is accepting the detours as oddly necessary practice for broader victories. Historians might jot down notes, forever analyzing whether Apollo was simply faith-testing the concept of perseverance or perhaps redefining it altogether with a glamorous twist that only Greek mythology could provide. With a nod to mainstream history, we can draw parallels to other persistent figures like Alexander the Great, who famously didn't stop expanding his empire until, much like Apollo, he too was probably tired, muddy, and longing for simpler conquests. And yet, what do they say? Great things never came from comfort zones. and one imagines that means the one's free from emotionally manipulative livestock as well. Meanwhile, Apollo soldiers on, fueled by the celestial blend of 1,000 thwarted shepherds before him and those flickering aspirations of eventual triumph, no matter how bovine-tinged. As the days stretch onward and every move becomes a quasi-mystical utterance charting this oddest of journeys, Apollo's perseverance only strengthens. The freshly won scars of humility undoubtedly whisper resonances about his divine character, albeit mostly through the disgruntled mumbles and ever-collective whispers of the Olympian Neighborhood Watch Network. Perhaps even Zeus himself peers down from Olympus, chuckling softly at the sight, making casual comments about, "Let this be a lesson," in the divine equivalent of sports bars. In the warm lull of evening, hints of reflective realization settle in, softened by the glowing horizon slowly wresting dominance from the sun, Apollo's faithful chariot now reluctantly lowering its golden wheel. You can't help but wonder whether, by divine design or existential accident, this endeavor is a brewing masterpiece yet unfinished. And now, we're at the cusp where curiosity tingles and slow wisdom breathes life into this ocean of obstacles. With each step, laden footfalls across grassy tangles and earthy scents, improvisations inevitable, Apollo reflects inwardly. Every rebuff becomes an echo chamber of potential, amplifying his resolve and perhaps hinting that true harmony cannot be achieved without such discordant tests. Even in this predicament, Apollo seems closer to key truths and answers more critically finessed than orchestrating symphonic strings could ever permit. As he casts his gaze over the field, you can ponder whether this pursuit, absurd and peripheral though it may seem, wasn't so much a diversion as it was always meant to be. Each mishap, echoing laughter from Hermes' unseen specter, only enriches the melody in Apollo's head, written with the ink of experience and stanzas of stomping cattle. You find yourself observing Apollo, the god of music, gazing at the horizon with a bewildered expression. If there was ever a moment when a god would rethink his life choices, this would be it. Herding cows wasn't supposed to be part of the divine job description, particularly not for someone who could strum a lyre like nobody's business. Imagine Kanye West deciding to take up fishing to find himself. Similar bewilderment, much less bling. Apollo, whose entrance into the world was as grand as any royal gala, is now knee-deep in cow dung, looking every bit like a child forced to wear an itchy Christmas sweater. He takes a moment to wonder if Zeus, his father, would even recognize him without a harp in his hand and ambrosia in the other. Each fumble with the herd reveals Apollo's previous naivete, an unfamiliar grappling with humility. You could practically hear the whispers of mortals and gods alike. "Oh, how the mighty have stumbled," they say. Perhaps, historians still argue whether Apollo's misadventures in the mundane world were a divine test or simply the consequences of younger brothers being, well, younger brothers. Yes, Hermes' notorious mischief had sparked this unintentional journey of enlightenment for Apollo. Like that one friend we all have who suggests a spontaneous road trip, and you end up in the middle of nowhere with no cell service. As Apollo battles through the absurd situation unfolding before him, it's clear that this is a learning curve steeper than the slopes of Olympus. He's accustomed to triumph and adulation. Even his chariot rides across the sky, painting it with vibrant hues every sunrise, commanded reverence. But reality, reality check, was sinking in faster than the Titanic on her maiden voyage. There in the field, amid the swish of tails and the rhythmic munching of grass, Apollo makes a discovery. Not every task in the universe can be conquered with divine abilities or musical talent. Herding requires patience, a skill Apollo had rarely exercised outside of adagio tempos. And stock sense humor, Zeus might have found this ordeal hilarious. Each time Apollo bends to coax a stubborn cow back into the straggling herd, a fragment of that divine ego chips away. In this bovine battlefield, the god begins to evolve. Here's where the fringes of myth become fascinating, hinting at how a celestial being tastes humility not with his lips but through each hoof's resistance. Ancient Romans would have marveled less at his music and more at this unwitting comedy of errors. Feeling a nudge at his side, Apollo glances down. A cow, unimpressed by the celestial saga unfolding around her, merely chews her cud with an unbothered demeanor. Suddenly, the terrain doesn't seem as daunting when lessons of resilience loom larger than any melody. Humor is an essential survival tool, like eating trail mix when protein bars are scarce. And let's be honest, there is something inherently amusing about watching such esteemed dignity, wrapped in divine aura, reduced to handling creatures whose sole ambition in life is to move as little as possible. And between Apollo and his newfound earth-whispered wisdom, the debate rages on. Did the gods truly hold wisdom beyond mortal grasp, or was there strength in embracing flaws and failures too? Life, or something closely resembling it, doesn't discriminate. Every frozen hot chocolate has the potential to turn into a sticky mess at the exact moment you least expect it. Fumbling through engaging with this so-called reality, Apollo absorbs not just the humility from the chorus of mooing chorus but with renewed perseverance. Life lessons lie not just in compositions but in the simplicity of everyday tasks. If he were to ever face a crisis again, or perhaps another hurt of something wayward, he would do so armed with both eloquence in speech and craftsmanship in practice. Despite his initial fumbles, it's clear Apollo's beginning to find grace and persistence. Through every tribulation comes the fine polish of character, often missed in the blinding glare of divine spotlight. A whispered note among the muses suggests an understanding that divine power isn't constrained by grandeur or achievability, but by the ability to pour wisdom into simple, untethered moments. If ancient scripts hold any truth, then within this seemingly insignificant journey lay kernels of masterful insight Apollo would carry with him, releasing it not through melody but through lived experience. Time, it seems, moves differently when tangled in the throes of personal growth. You may even find yourself wading through reflective solitude, echoing a commonality between mortals seeking peace in the patient folding of laundry or the rhythmic chopping of vegetables. To do is to learn, and there is unfathomable comfort in knowing we are bound together, navigating the labyrinth of life. As the sun finally begins to dip below the horizon, its tips bathing Apollo in a familiar glow, there's a renewed sense of self, proof that even a god wasn't above evolving. Picture him considering his return to Olympian symphonies with this understanding, that legends are less about glowing halos and tunics, and more about rising anew with each oscillating note of experience. Recall that quirky notion from earlier times where the Egyptians believed in the magical properties of crocodile dung as a potential beauty product? It's all about perspective, just like Apollo's cowherding escapade. Beauty and growth emerge in unexpected places, often hilariously infuriating, but undeniably soul-enriching. In these fields, amid the silent spectators of time, the sage trees and the infinite canopy of stars, Apollo, our divine herder, has become what myths aspire to be. Reflective, humbled, resilient, yet untouched by mortal cynicism. The immortal mends pathways of chaos into intricate tapestries of understanding. And off to Olympus, now wiser than before, strides Apollo, leaving behind echoes of laughter, lessons, and the resolute crunch of grass underfoot. So, you're Apollo, the Greek god of music, archery, and occasional cowherding, though perhaps not by choice. Picture this. After several comedic and frankly embarrassing attempts at wrangling a stubborn herd of cattle, you finally resign to the fact that your current strategy isn't quite, well, working. You've serenaded the cows, attempted a less-than-graceful imitation of shepherds from the mortal realm, and persisted like a deity on a baffling mission. But let's face it, dear listener, you're more likely to charm the pants off a temple maiden with your lyre than get these cows to follow you anywhere. In ancient Greece, it was understood that when even gods stumbled, because let's be honest, if Apollo can have a day off his usual game, so can we, you'd eventually turn to your divine family. You pondered this approach with the subtlety of someone repeatedly lifting the receiver of a divine hotline, who would pick up on the first ring instead of leaving you on celestial hold. Seeking assistance from fellow Olympian gods wasn't just an act of humility, it was a last-resort plea wrapped in an awkward package of pride and desperation. Oh, let's not kid ourselves, this decision is painted with a broad brush of drama. Imagine walking into the grand halls of Olympus with your head hung only slightly behind a well-maintained godly aura. You're striding with purpose, sure, but inside you're narrating your own sitcom theme song. Historical records, even those on dusty papyrus, might not capture the moment, but historians still debate whether Apollo stumbled over a well-placed pigeon during this decisive walk to avoid another mythical sibling debacle. Arriving before Jupiter, Zeus, if you prefer his Greek handle, you find out that even the king of the gods can barely suppress a grin at your plight. After all, the Greeks were known for their appreciation of humor even among the divine. For instance, they believed in cheeky nymphs charming woodland travelers. Now, appealing to the gods involved navigating a tapestry of relationships as intricate as a senator's toga. Your predicament invites the contrasting reactions of chuckles, sympathy, and unsolicited advice. A light breeze wafts through the halls, bringing with it the scent of ambrosia, as you earn the attention of Athena. Known for her wisdom and strategic mind, Athena considers your tale with a bemused yet understanding gaze. In the presence of such collected divinity, you feel an odd camaraderie enveloping you. You can't help but notice that even divinely resourceful characters have their, oh, let's say, special skills, which might not extend to bovine management. And somewhere at the fringes of this council, you catch sight of your sister Artemis, chuckling silently to herself. You suspect it's not about your predicament, but perhaps about how those cows managed to wander deep into her sacred forests. Remember our earlier segue into quirky historical insights? Picture Artemis, a patron of wilderness, wondering if her brother was this close to asking owls for advice. It's the sort of odd, endearing family dynamic even Homer himself might overlook. As you air out your distress, what you didn't expect was Aphrodite's suggestion. Yes, the goddess of love proposes using charm instead of force. Okay, you ponder, why hadn't you thought of that? It's a bright idea on paper, but in execution, well, you'd rather not envision cows swaying to romantic ballads under moonlight. Surely even cattle desire an aura of mystery in their romances, right? Also, present at your curious court is Zeus's arm gently poking fun, likely encouraging you that even in insecurities, there's strength. Or was it to encourage you to hurry along, for it was nearly time for an Olympian feast? Either way, the involvement of sun and sky gods might mean more practical solutions or picnics ahead. Historians still argue whether such divine council sessions were akin to modern board games night, complete with cunning moves and unspoken allegiances. As you bring your plea to a close, you feel not just the desire to solve your bovine puzzle but an unexpected rush of warmth, as if this divine intervention is a family reunion punctuated by Olympus's own version of team-building activities. A wave of delightful absurdity ripples through Olympus, and what you gain isn't just guidance but compassion from your fellow deities. With spontaneity, they volunteer their strengths. Hermes appears less guarded, Athena nods encouraging gestures, and Dionysus, always the wild card, offers wine should things really hit the fan again. Perfect, just in time for a Greek tragedy. This new alliance stirs a curious hope within you, a stark reminder of the value in leaning on others even when the world expects you to be the beacon of all things solo and heroic. Your journey becomes less about hurting and more about the connections you forge, however intangibly awkward. In navigating your humbling escapades, laughter becomes the unexpected glue binding these divine bonds. So, dear listener, here you stand with the Olympian backdrop of laughter and unexpected alliances, a divine ensemble cast, ready to unsnarl the temporally twisted threads of cow-related chaos. Perhaps it wasn't just the cows you sought to wrangle, but also the newfound respect among the gods themselves. Much like the tales that wander from mouth to scroll across time, you'll leave this halidescent episode understanding that even in a god's quest to handle, well, collaboration can carve the path to resolution. Not to mention a good chuckle over evening nectar by the hearth. You find yourself in the lush, celestial expanses of ancient Greece, where the scent of ambrosia mingles with the air, a peculiar blend of heavenly aroma and earthly familiarity. Imagine, if you will, the moment Apollo, the golden god of the sun and music, stands with clenched fists in a meadow, eyes scanning for his mischievous brother, Hermes. A confrontation like no other is brewing, and it's as if the very heavens hold their collective breath. The sun god, armed with an uneasy blend of irritation and curiosity, readies himself for an encounter rich with divine humor and a touch of sibling rivalry. Now, if you drifted here on strange, whispering breezes, those may have been carried by Hermes himself. He's the very essence of wit and whimsy, a messenger god whose talents extended to the less noble skill of cow lifting. Picture Hermes, the glimmery-eyed trickster, always poised with a smile that says, "Caught me if you can." He's the ancient precursor to all your favorite stage magicians, complete with charming sleights of hand, in this case, cow theft. Witness them now, face to face under the azure heavens. Apollo, tall and glowing as a bronze statue brought to life, looks at his brother. His lyre, usually a comforter, hangs limp by his side. For a moment, both gods hover in an uneasy stillness. The kind of moment when you know frivolities are set aside, and it's all about determining which Olympian will narrate the story to the others during ambrosia hour. Historians still argue whether Hermes truly invented more pranks than the other divine beings combined. But here, with eyes twinkling, he makes his case yet again. It takes but a few choice, breezy words from him to spark this confrontation, putting on display the rare blend of divine intervention and pure wit that only a god with winged sandals could muster. Apollo, refusing to be outshone by his younger brother's glib antics, opts for a more direct but equally clever approach. One easily imagines him opting for fiery rhetoric, but Apollo instead channels his annoyance into sharp, articulate reasoning, using logic like arrows direct from his golden quiver. Through glib rebuttals and quick-silvered twists of words, the brothers engage in a verbal dance that few mortals could follow. It's a reminder that, sometimes, being a god includes the tiresome task of negotiating custody rights over a celestial cowherd. Remember the warmth of a sunbeam interrupted by an unexpected cloud? That's the shift from Apollo's noble countenance to the playful willingness to embrace the moment. Here, too, you could wonder if ancient comedy shows were slightly modeled after such godly encounters. One half frustration, one half adaptation, and entirely captivating. The sun hero rallies his inner resources, focusing on transformation. Not through sheer power, but through subtle reasoning and clever repartee, the brothers' words weave a tapestry of divine trickery and negotiation. There's a chuckle hiding in Apollo's eyes as he speaks, as if even he knows he's meant to learn much from this unexpected lesson. Flute music, perhaps one of Hermes' invisible trademarks, hums gently through the scene. It underscores their discourse, ever the backdrop to divine narratives. Historical records might speculate if this was an actual divine debate or merely an allegory to teach humility. Either way, the brothers carry on, each word like a chess move across a mystical board. One cannot help but notice the subtle transformation taking place within both gods. Apollo, the musician, discovers the melody and conflict resolution, while Hermes, perhaps more human than he'd care to admit, senses the weight of his whims. They find themselves unwitting co-authors of a tale unfolding in the hallowed halls of Olympus, one that recognizes the balance between hubris and humor, the extraordinary and the mundane. As the sky shifts to twilight, dappling the meadow in hues of gold and purple, an invisible yet palpable truce forms. You almost hear their cosmic harmony interlacing with the very fabric of the world, a sound without beginning or end, echoing through time, whispering of brotherhood more profound than pranks ever pulled. And indeed, the divine meeting modifies the tapestry of their interlocked fates, threading respect where rivalry once stood. This woven moment rests somewhere between earnest satire and genuine celestial diplomacy. It leaves a slight breeze across your consciousness. Maybe it's a reminder that even gods, with all their grandeur, occasionally need to engage in a good old-fashioned sibling debate. Perhaps it even adds a layer of understanding that you're already richer for having witnessed it, from the laughter of ancient tales to the very here and now, feeling the quiet settling over as the story continues its course. Like a gentle lullaby from the heavens to your heart. So here you are, right in the midst of divine negotiation, of course, not your typical diplomatic tea party. The buzz of Mount Olympus is palpable, even here where you tread through this celestial tete-a-tete. You can almost feel the tension in the celestial air, the curtain being drawn back on a sibling rivalry that could rival even the most heated family reunion dispute, who gets the last slice of ambrosia cake. And so, Apollo and Hermes, the golden god of music and the craftiest trickster in all of Greece, find themselves at a cosmic crossroads, entwined in a complex dance of words and wits. Apollo, having just been tempered by an unorthodox journey of cow-wrangling under tremulous circumstances, is now facing Hermes, whose cleverness has led them to this pivotal moment. It's a testament to the god's penchant for theatrics, and, let's face it, for making life just a little bit more interesting. The scene is ripe with an Olympian aura. Think clouds of lavender, not unlike our ancient friends' favorite perfumes, swirling just above. The stage is set for peace talks. Historians still argue whether this infamous bovine misadventure was the catalyst for one of the most intriguing truces in divine history, or simply an amusing subplot to the gods' lives. Either way, the negotiation that unfolds now is less about cows and more about respect. You're immersed in a sense of timeless tension, watching as Hermes suavely outmaneuvers yet another rhetorical pitfall, as if navigating the shoals of the Aegean with nothing but a mischievous smile and a wink. This divine diplomat knows the stakes, maintaining his reputation while acknowledging that even a god is not forbidden from admission of, dare he say it, admiration? Imagine hearing the gentle strum of Apollo's lyre as the god himself softens the tone, a calculated maneuver in what might otherwise become an endless cycle of trickery. No, this is not the time for arrows and anger, but for melodies and mended fences. Apollo, in a move that might surprise even you, the humble observer, acknowledges Hermes' skill and ingenuity in the same way a master painter might admire the brushwork of an emerging protege. He recognizes that Hermes' maneuvering with the cows, though nerve-wracking, was nothing short of genius. But don't think for a moment Apollo's transformation into a willing diplomat happened in the blink of an eye. Remember those essential qualities he painstakingly developed? Humility and perseverance are suddenly not just characteristics, but tools to bridge the divine divide. Through a tapestry of compromise and comprehension, you see the transformation of their relationship right before your eyes. The brothers may not share every spark of creativity in their respective arsenals, but they certainly now share a common respect for each other's formidable talents. And oh, the sweet sound of consensus. They reach a truce, the details of which might be as ephemeral as the location itself, perhaps an agreement to share territories of influence or to refrain from using each other's talents as easy targets for Olympian barbs at the next gathering. Hermes agrees, in principle, not to steal Apollo's thunder, both metaphorically and, thanks to Zeus's occasional mood swings, quite literally. A bit of a psychological leap, considering Hermes is always partial to a little trickery before breakfast. Yet, Apollo's experience in 1,800 different disciplines, scores of which not detailed in mainstream myths, lets him absorb these negotiations with wisdom and an openness that was forged over the course of missing cows and missing beets. If only time-traveling ancient historians had managed to catch the precise words exchanged. Many of them argue about what the true catalyst for their peaceful resolution was, whether it was the musical duel or perhaps even a mutual realization of their shared divine heritage and all its divine quirks. As you indulge in the warm glow of their newfound understanding, take a moment to marvel at the understated vibrance of ancient Greek sibling dynamics. The struggle, the poetic tête-à-têtes, culminate in a genuine respect, a fitting resolution after eons of epic mischief and misadventures. Through their celestial compromise, both learn that perhaps their respective domains do overlap but can coexist, complementing more than conflicting. Who would have guessed a dozen cows could graze such platitudes into this surprising pasture of peace? A quirky historical tidbit to consider while you follow their path to peace. Did you know that Greek sailors once believed Apollo's lyre had the strength of storms, able to command them at will? Such power beneath those gentle strings, not unlike the delicate strings of diplomacy at play today. And just like Zeus's reluctant affection for abstemious lightning bolt usage, Apollo embraces these newfound measures with grace. As you take a deep breath, slowing down the tempo of your heartbeat to match the harmony resonating through Olympus's airy corridors, the lesson is clear and calming. There are symphonies in silence, strength and serenity, and peace to be found, even in the most complex relationships. And so, with gods as with men, understanding trickles down like ambrosia, offering sustenance for the soul nurtured not by superiority but by simplicity. You can rest easy knowing that even in a realm of endless might and myth, respect and understanding can be the ultimate triumph. With a newfound sense of humility, Apollo returns to Delphi, his lyre gently cradled in his arms, as if knowing that each string holds more than just notes, but lessons learned from time spent amongst cows rather than clouds. You can't help but imagine Apollo, his previous arrogance melted away, looking down at his hands with a new appreciation for their dexterity, not just for plucking strings, but even for wrangling unruly bovines. Historians still argue whether this episode with the cows actually refined his musicality or simply his perspectives. Picture him sitting in the soft glow of the setting sun, tuning his lyre, the golden notes dancing through the crisp air like tiny sunbeams. It's as if Apollo can convey through music what words could never express, the humility of knowing there is always something to learn. And as his melodies float over the hills, even the smallest woodland creatures pause, enchanted not by the god's undeniable deity but by the authenticity born of his journey. Yes, even the woodpeckers would listen, taking a break from their incessant tapping to appreciate the sounds of a god humbled by a task as rustic as herding cows. The mortals of Delphi gather, feeling a change in the air, instinctively drawn to where their beloved god has returned to his true calling. His presence has always inspired a certain reverence, but now, with a layer of wisdom glinting in his eyes, they see something different. There's a warmth, a universal truth in the music that curls around their hearts. Imperfection is not a flaw but a feature of existence, the bumps in the road shaping the journey. Apollo hasn't just returned to music, he's returned with a new ardor for healing, too. Those hands that attempted to guide the herd now find a gentle assurance in mending wounds and soothing pains. Rather than feeling the need to dazzle with feats of strength or blind with brilliance, he settles into a rhythm of quiet triumphs. Ancient healers often used music in their practices, a curious fact that makes Apollo's dual talents in music and healing seem doubly divine. Crocodile dung sunscreen may have its day in Egyptian rituals, but surely music, Apollo's balm, carries a longer-lasting grace. Imagine him now, dipping the tips of his fingers in cool water, feeling the soft fabric of leaves between his touch, intuiting the pulse of nature and casting it into tunes that harmonize the chaos of existence. Through these gestures, Apollo forges bonds, an unspoken dialogue with both the mortal realm and the divine. Back in the mundane world, perhaps you can relate it to the relief one finds in returning to an old hobby after a tumultuous period. how every stroke of a paintbrush or strum of a chord feels imbued with a little extra life. You'll remember, of course, how Apollo asked for aid from other Olympian gods, which turned into a grand symphony of laughter. Now, however, the camaraderie takes on an affectionate tone, as even Hermes nods in appreciation at Apollo's freshly deepened talents. In their piece, there's now a rapport akin to a well-choreographed ballet of personalities, one whimsically endearing, the other fervently passionate. Ultimately, this humbling journey doubles as a reminder that deities, much like mortals, navigate the nuances of trial and error. And as golden notes ripple through the evening, dear listener, know that each soft melody carries Apollo's tale, a narrative of embracing errors, learning deeply, and finding an anchoring beauty in the ordinary. As the story of Apollo winds to a gentle close, the tempo eases. In the soft imagery of dusk, let your breathing follow its rhythm, slow and purposeful. Picture yourself drifting on the gentle currents of Apollo's melodies, each note a tiny vessel carrying you toward serenity. Picture the golden light of Apollo's music fading into the quiet blues and purples of the night sky, a cosmic lullaby. In this softened universe, ease your senses, let them stretch into the quilt of calm gradually drawn over the landscape. Like Apollo, who has come full circle, find your own circle of stillness, a whisper of patience and resilience in your pulse. Allow the world around you to melt away as the notes of Apollo's lyre become indistinct, almost a memory of sound rather than sound itself. Lean into this tranquil void. In this moment, everything is as it should be. Renewal lies just a serene sigh away.